Paul Burchill debuted in WWE in 2005 as an associate of William Regal's. The pair kept an association and tagged often for a few months before Burchill decided he wanted to split from Regal to do a pirate gimmick. He stayed on SmackDown for less than a year doing this before he was taken off TV and re-debuted on Raw in 2008 with his on-screen sister Katie Lee Burchill, where it was implied that the two had an incestuous relationship. Wow, that's money! He'd spend about a year on Raw before finishing up his WWE tenure in ECW in a brief feud with the Hurricane. But what I want to cover in this video is Paul Burchill's run in the FWA before he ever got signed to WWE, a run that was, in my opinion, the best utilisation and capitalisation of Paul Burchill's talents. FWA British Uprising at York Hall in Bethnal Green was the first live wrestling event I ever went to. I was a big fan of Balls Mahoney and Jerry Lynn, and I'd seen some stuff of AJ Styles and NWA TNA with tape trading, but I went into the show largely not having heard of or seen any of these people on it before, but I left with my mind absolutely blown. There was this whole other wrestling scene outside of what was televised. Paul Burchill would run in before the scheduled tag team match could take place. As the New Breed made their entrance, Paul Burchill would put Curve into a torture rack, then hit a neck breaker. Ash would jump at Burchill with a crossbody, but Burchill would catch it and then hoist Ash onto his shoulders before hitting a kamikaze crash followed by a standing moonsault. Curve would knock Burchill off his feet with a series of kicks, but then the monster would just nip up and put Curve through a table at ringside. With his partner incapacitated, Ash would go at it alone in this tag match against the UK Pitbulls and eventually succumb to them. But who was that Burchill guy with that random run-in? A couple months later, the FWA promoted another live event at Broxbourne Civic Hall. AJ Styles and Jerry Lynn returned, and there'd also be a six-man tag match where Burchill would make another run-in and destroy almost everyone. There's no footage available of that, but there is footage available of his next attack, which would come 4 months later, also at the Broxbourne Civic Hall. The pairing of Hampton Court would flee the scene, leaving the hated referee Steve Linsky to take the kamikaze crash, followed by the standing moonsault, and this time Burchill would add a new thing, a standing star press. So who was this Hampton Court? Well, it was the Duke of Danger and his faithful butler Simmons. A handicap match between them versus Burchill would be signed for the Frontiers of Honor event at York Hall, the same place Burchill had done his run in 7 months earlier. Duke of Danger claimed he had an injury and would take himself out of the match and replace himself and Simmons with Double Dragon. The former leader of the old school, Dean Ayers, would come out. As that faction had now dissolved, the Twisted Genius would announce he had a Plan B, and that Plan B was Burchill. Dean Ayers would also say for the first time the catchphrase that himself and Mr. Burchill wouldn't accept any responsibility for any broken bones. And with that, the first match of Burchill's on a main FWA show would begin. As soon as he slid in the ring, the team of Raj Ghosh and Ross Jordan would batter him with stomps. Burchill would break through a double clothesline attempt and knock them down with clotheslines of his own. He'd hit Ross Jordan with the Northern Lights suplex into the air raid crash / white noise combination. He'd then catch Raj Ghosh, seemingly attempting a powerbomb. Raj Ghosh would sunset flip his way out of it, but after a bit of jostling back and forth, Burchill would hit the sit-out powerbomb. Simmons would pull the referee out to disrupt the count. Burchill would chase him round the ring, but Simmons would lead him straight back into another barrage of stomps. Double Dragon would follow up with a perfectly timed sandwich dropkick to Burchill's head. After a subsequent double hip toss and double elbow drop, Double Dragon would nip up and then cockily pose on the top rope, but then Burchill would perform a nip up of his own. Raj shoved his own partner to the wall, but then saved him. But they couldn't save themselves or each other from what would happen next. Raj Ghosh tried to stop himself from getting German suplexed to grab hold of Ross, but the pair of them would be suplexed together. Paul Burchill then went to the top rope for a moonsault that, in all honesty, was never ever going to connect. Surely enough, Double Dragon got out the way and then regrouped on the outside of the ring. Though he'd missed his humongous moonsault, he wouldn't miss his next move, and that would be an amazing jumping dive over the top rope and corner post. Incredibly, it was a clean jump as well. He didn't even use his hands to vault himself. The crowd were on their feet chanting "Holy SHIT." Ross Jordan got caught in a fireman's carry and then endured the kamikaze crash, followed by the standing moonsault, followed by the standing star press. What a trifecta. Raj Ghosh's crossbody would be caught and he'd suffer wasteland, well, before it was actually even called the wasteland, followed by a sit-out bulldog style power slam, which would be called the move with no name. Both members of Double Dragon would be counted out by the referee for a double knockout victory for Paul Burchill. Even on a card full of independent stars giving first-rate performances, this match stood out in the best possible way. It was obvious that Burchill was going to go places. A month later, the FWA would return to the Broxbourne Civic Hall where the match between Hampton Court and Burchill would be rebooked. Duke of Danger, however, in a humorous promo in which he had said that he'd attended Prince William's birthday party, that was funny, he said that he'd re-injured his arm while slipping on a bottle of Chateau Pion 1925, so he'd be unable to compete in this match also, and announced his replacement, Mark Sloan. So it would be Simmons and Mark Sloan facing Burchill in this handicap match. They'd jump Burchill early, have their way with him for a bit, which included a Simmons splash. But Burchill would do an impressive springboard backflip over the two of them before hitting them with a double clothesline. He followed that up with a springboard elbow drop to each man's thigh. He'd then follow up with a gut breaker, back breaker, rock bottom on Simmons, while Mark Sloan would receive the Northern Lights suplex air raid crash combination. Much like in the previous match, Simmons would lead Burchill on a chase where they'd cut Burchill off before he could re-enter the ring. They intended to bring Burchill in the hard way with a double suplex, but Burchill used his agility to land on his feet and then would hit the pair with a double suplex of his own. It appeared we'd see another double German suplex like we did in the last match, but Mark Sloan would hit a kick to the bollocks, and then they'd do a double back suplex. Now in control of the match, Mark Sloan attempted to hold Burchill in place for a Butler Buster, but Mark Sloan took the Butler Buster instead. Simmons would take the incredible trifecta of moves, the kamikaze crash, the standing moonsault, and the standing shooting star press, while Mark Sloan would take a torture rack into a neck breaker, followed by the move with no name. And with that, Burchill was victorious once again with a double knockout countout. Having twice gotten himself out of the predicament of having to wrestle Paul Burchill, Duke of Danger would finally have his match signed. British Uprising 2, it would be Hampton Court versus Burchill. There was one event before British Uprising 2, Hot Wired, once again at the Broxbourne Civic Hall, where Duke of Danger would partake in a public workout. Duke of Danger instructed Simmons to bring out 4 peasants ripe for a thrashing to be the subjects for the demonstration. I haven't mentioned this yet, but Simmons the Butler was incredibly popular with the FWA audience, and his commentary, narration if you like, on this segment was extremely well received, and actually, to be fair, really, really entertaining.
Yeah, getting nabbed all the time.
Scoundrel slasher there.
Oh! Probably work out. And here we go. Up top and... Oh, down! Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the slide buster.
You are so heartless. Do you not appreciate the fact that those nails can be absolutely devastating? That was fantastic. What the... Oh, look at that! It's not opening.
Perfect. That is the peasant dreams. The peasant blocker.
Oh, peasant blocker!
Dean Ayers would arrive and take the mic off Simmons and announce that the last demonstration would be called For Whom the Bell Tolls, and with that the bell of Paul Burchill's theme sounded and the monster ran into the ring. Burchill wiped out the peasants, who were in fact trainees and wrestlers at the FWA Academy, with a series of moves which were now becoming familiar in his patented manoeuvres and combinations, but he added a new one to the mix, the C4. He executed on a young Rishi Ghosh who's still wrestling today as the Prince in Mumbai. And also, to make things a little different this time, he'd execute his trifecta of moves on not one, but two of the peasants simultaneously. The kamikaze crash, a moonsault onto both of them, and a standing star press also onto both of them. The crowd went wild, and it was a fantastic way to build up the match for British Uprising 2. Speaking of which, the match was also promoted and featured in the British Uprising 2 music video, which I highly recommend checking out in its entirety. It really is great.
One monster terrorizing.
British Uprising 2 at York Hall was another stacked event featuring CM Punk, Colt Cabana and Just Incredible, and yes, we'd finally get to see this handicap match of Hampton Court versus Burchill with no funny business where Duke of Danger would pull himself out. Dean Ayas introduced Paul Burchill, and as Burchill slid into the ring, Hampton Court fled, so Burchill went after Buttercup, the Duke of Danger's personal maid. It appeared he would set her up for the move with no name, but Hampton Court quickly saved her. After drilling Burchill with a series of strikes, they went for a double send, but Burchill backflipped out of it, threw them away, hit the ropes and hit a double clothesline followed by a head nip. What an incredible start to the match this was. Burchill hit the Northern Lights suplex air raid crash combination on Simmons. Burchill then repeatedly kneed Duke of Danger in his derby and looked to go for his sit-out power slam, but Duke of Danger got him in a waistlock. There was a bit of a struggle, and while Duke of Danger was in a waistlock, Simmons would try a sunset flip off the middle rope. This would cause Burchill to give Duke of Danger a German suplex. Simmons then dutifully pushed Duke of Danger out of harm's way to take a Paul Burchill running forearm. After that, Burchill went up to the top rope, seemingly to do a moonsault, but Duke of Danger would shove him off and send Burchill crashing to the timekeeper's table outside. For the first time, Paul Burchill was in a very vulnerable position. Simmons went outside to pummel him, and Paul Burchill's manager Dean Diaz even got smashed into the corner post. Hampton Court would get Burchill back in the ring. Simmons would throw Burchill into a running knee from Duke of Danger, and he followed that up with the Swine Buster neckbreaker. Burchill was actually pinned and had to kick out for the first time in his brief FWA career. Burchill would show signs of life like when he resisted getting powerbombed, but Hampton Court kept at it and were able to hit the double assisted sit-out powerbomb. Paul Burchill resisted getting put into a submission, and he was able to slap on a sharpshooter onto Duke of Danger himself. Simmons broke it up. Burchill grabbed him, hit the backbreaker, but before he could do the Uranagi, Duke of Danger cut him off with a low dropkick to the knee. Hampton Court gave Burchill a hard send-off into the corner to flip him over, then followed that up with an elevated Butler Buster. As Duke of Danger locked on that submission he was trying to find earlier, Simmons attempted to take the pinfall. Duke of Danger was furious at Simmons, and there seemed to be a bit of dissension between Hampton Court. This gave Burchill the chance to get fired up by his manager, who slapped him on the outside. Burchill made a spirited comeback. He gave Duke of Danger the patented trifecta: the kamikaze crash, the standing moonsault, the standing star press, and he gave Simmons the move with no name sit-out power slam. Duke of Danger valiantly pulled himself back to his feet, very pleased with himself seemingly, but Burchill would finish him off with the C4. A double 10 count later, and the referee ruled another double knockout for Burchill's third consecutive victory. The FWA would next present New Frontiers, and at this event, Hampton Court was scheduled to take on George Castano and Stevie Lynn in tag action. Duke of Danger was attacked somewhere backstage, and in a twist, Paul Burchill would step in to be Simmons' partner. Mr. Reyes and Mr. Burchill and Mr. Simmons would not be responsible for any broken bones. Well, the unusual pairing were very well received by the crowd, and the two would go on to win their match. This partnership wouldn't last. At the next event, they'd go one-on-one. I forget the reasons why exactly, but Simmons once again endured a brutal beating. Burchill walked off, but Simmons didn't succumb to the 10 count and instead managed to pull himself up with the ropes. Before Burchill could return to the ring to finish the job, he was attacked by Drew McDonald, who at this time was the new leader of the family, or what would become the Triad. Duke of Danger would return and be a fan favourite, as Hampton Court would go on to defeat the family for the FWA Tag Team titles. Burchill, meanwhile, would get a chance at revenge against Drew McDonald in a 6-man tag at the Coventry Skydome at British Uprising 3. The match was, well, good when Burchill was in it and did his stuff, but otherwise it's quite a cumbersome and lengthy mess, and they put it in black and white to try and censor the blood. In November 2004, Burchill would have his final match in the FWA, taking on Alex Shane for the FWA title. Shortly later, in 2005, William Regal debuted Paul Burchill to SmackDown, but instead of doing the talking and having Burchill's excellent work speak for itself, they had Burchill talk, and he delivered cracking lines like this.
You tiptoe dancing puff.
But these are other subjects for other videos. This was Paul Burchill's run in the FWA, and I thought it was an excellent crop of matches, and quite unique. He was like Bill Goldberg, but except he did moonsaults and shooting star presses. So if you didn't know, I hope you enjoyed learning about it, and if you did, I hope you enjoyed a trip down memory lane. Marky D will see you Wednesday, you'll see me back for the Impact review on Friday, you see Marky again Saturday, and hopefully you should see me back next Monday also. So, see the subscribe button? Shove it, man, and I'll see you next time.
Something real. What was it that Burchill called Scotty? Head dancing, he was dancing like a powder puff, toe dancing, puff, toe dancing, puff.
Block the big back body drop. Into the cover.
It's a puff. Oh, a puff. Puff. It's a mince.
Oh, look at this. Scotty may have it here. And Burchill had 2 kicks out. It's a what?
A mince.